the great bells of Bow, of the Church of Saint Mary le Bow.
This woman lived her entire life on the edge. 8 marriages, countless love affairs, and scandals that shocked the world. Elizabeth Taylor dazzled on screens and red carpets, but her real life resembled drama filled with highs and lows. Her list of husbands included both the heir to one of the world's wealthiest empires and a simple construction worker. All of this encapsulates the scandalous life of Elizabeth Taylor, marked by destruction. Elizabeth Rosamond Taylor was born on February 27, 1932 in Hampstead, London, England. This elegant neighborhood, immersed in the greenery of its famous parks and celebrated for its bohemian atmosphere, seemed to be a destined part of the future star's life. Picture it: grand mansions, a noble silence interrupted only by the sounds of Victorian church bells, and a world that was already beginning to tremble under the looming threat of war. It was here, amidst this contrast of tranquility and unease, that the story of a girl began. A girl whose incredible beauty and magnetism would transform Hollywood. But this cozy world was short-lived. War knocked on Europe's doors, shattering the familiar order. Elizabeth was the youngest child in a family that could be described as ideal. Her father, Francis Lennox Taylor, was a successful art dealer, surrounded by exquisite works of art. Her mother, Sarah Violet Warnbrodt, had once graced the American theater stage. Their home was filled with refinement and culture. However, this utopia proved fragile. Elizabeth's parents, being Americans, enjoyed their life in London until the storms of World War II forced them to return to the United States. This move became the first major upheaval for young Elizabeth, who'd grown up surrounded by an atmosphere of abundance and stability. Los Angeles, however, was not just another city. It was Hollywood, a place that would soon become not only her new home, but the stage on which the grand story of her life would unfold. At the age of 10, fate offered her a rare opportunity. Elizabeth made her film debut in Lassie Come Home, 1943. Her unique appearance, violet eyes that seemed to pierce straight to the soul, and a double row of lashes that gave her a theatrical, mesmerizing gaze, immediately captured the attention of producers. Elizabeth became a true gem for Hollywood. Her life suddenly became a story all her own. Working in the film industry demanded strict discipline. From an early age, Elizabeth knew what it meant to live according to a schedule dictated by studio contracts. Her mother, Sarah, saw Elizabeth as the realization of her own unfulfilled dreams. It was Sarah who insisted that Elizabeth become an actress, often depriving her of simple childhood joys. "My childhood? I didn't have one," Elizabeth once admitted. Instead of playing with friends or attending school lessons, she spent her days in the studio, under the scrutiny of cameras and the watchful eyes of directors. True fame came to Elizabeth at the age of 12 when she starred in National Velvet, 1944. But along with fame came a profound sense of isolation. "I never felt like everyone else," she later said. Her uniqueness made her a star, but simultaneously distanced her from the world of ordinary people. Surrounded by crowds of admirers, Elizabeth felt alone, realizing that genuine friendship and intimacy were likely out of reach. At the age of 17, Elizabeth Taylor, the embodiment of youthful beauty and charm, took her first steps into adulthood by marrying Conrad Hilton Jr., the heir to the globally renowned Hilton hotel chain. At the time, she believed she was living a fairy tale: lavish receptions, media attention, and the status of being the wife of a wealthy heir. But the fairy tale quickly turned into a nightmare. Just 8 months later, their marriage ended in a highly publicized divorce. Conrad's rough behavior, struggles with alcohol, and inability to respect his young wife shattered all her dreams. "I was just a child playing at love," Elizabeth later admitted. This episode revealed how fragile the boundary is between the luxury of a glamorous world and personal suffering. Outwardly, she was a movie star and a symbol of perfection, but inside, she remained a vulnerable girl facing harsh realities for the first time. The divorce was a devastating blow. Elizabeth acknowledged that at 17, she had no real understanding of what it meant to be married. For her first steps into the world of love and relationships proved painful, leaving scars she hid behind a mask of confidence. This early disappointment shaped her perspective on love as a perpetual search for an unattainable ideal. Elizabeth always dreamed of a love that mirrored the magic of the silver screen, but real life repeatedly showed her otherwise. Thanks to her irresistible beauty and remarkable talent, Elizabeth Taylor soon became part of Hollywood's golden elite. Her youth was not spent in classrooms but on red carpets, surrounded by the most famous and influential figures of the time. She attended lavish parties alongside legends, Marilyn Monroe, whose charm captivated crowds, and Frank Sinatra, whose songs played on every radio station. What was it like to be thrust into the spotlight at such a young age? Elizabeth seemed to live under a microscope. Every step she took was a topic of discussion. Her outfits were imitated, and her personal life became fodder for gossip. The glitter of Hollywood was mesmerizing, but also relentless. However, life in Hollywood came with a price. The studio Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, with which she was under contract, meticulously managed her image. To the public, Elizabeth was the embodiment of perfection, an impeccable actress and flawless beauty. But behind this facade was a young woman unable to reveal her true self. The studio forbade scandals controlling her every move and word. They dictated how she dressed, who she associated with, and even turned her romantic affairs into carefully planned publicity stunts. Hollywood offered her luxury and status, but stripped her of the simple freedom to live authentically. Elizabeth found herself trapped, adored by millions, yet truly known by no one. Elizabeth Taylor never stayed out of the spotlight, and rumors about her romances only fueled the public's fascination. The press attributed relationships to her with colleagues like Montgomery Clift and Howard Keel. These stories were often exaggerated or entirely fabricated, but Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer eagerly capitalized on them to promote her films. For Elizabeth, this became yet another trap of Hollywood. Her personal life, even if invented by tabloids, turned into a spectacle for millions. Every glance, smile, or gesture was interpreted as evidence of yet another romantic intrigue. Her second marriage to British actor Michael Wilding began as a quiet refuge in the stormy seas of Hollywood. Michael, 20 years her senior, offered the stability Elizabeth craved. However, that stability quickly bored her. While the divorce was an allowed scandal, society criticized her for her inability to maintain long-term relationships. Newspapers relished her personal failures, and her fan base was divided between supporters and detractors. Elizabeth, still searching for herself and her place in the world, suddenly realized that every move she made was met with a storm of criticism. In a world where everyone pursued fame, friendship was a rarity. Elizabeth wanted allies among fellow stars, but Hollywood's intrigues made this nearly impossible. Her relationships with actresses like Marilyn Monroe were often perceived as icy rivalries. Although Taylor repeatedly emphasized that she didn't see her colleagues as competitors, the atmosphere of envy and distrust made genuine connection difficult. The loneliness she had felt since childhood only deepened. Imagine being young, beautiful, talented, surrounded by luxury and admiration, yet finding that everyone who approaches either wants to use you or is afraid of you. And then, a turning point occurred that changed her life even more. The 1950s became a golden era for Elizabeth Taylor. MGM Studios positioned her as their leading star, and she's shown brightly in iconic films such as A Place in the Sun, 1951, and Giant, 1956. These roles solidified her status as a top-tier actress, capable of conveying profound emotions and embodying the ideal of femininity on screen. Elizabeth didn't just portray her characters, she lived them. Her dramatic flair and elegance set a standard admired by millions. She became an icon whose image inspired, fascinated, and even dictated trends. Every scene, every frame, demanded perfection from her. Mistakes were unforgivable, as millions expected nothing short of brilliance. Do you even know how much she was paid for her roles? The year 1963 was monumental for Elizabeth Taylor. Her $1 million fee for the film Cleopatra set a record, making her the first actress in history to achieve such financial status. Hollywood was astounded. The majestic Cleopatra and the legendary Elizabeth became one. However, the film's production was fraught with scandals. Budget overruns threatened to bankrupt the studio, and on set, Elizabeth began a passionate affair with Richard Burton, which soon became one of the most talked about relationships in Hollywood history. On screen, she embodied the legendary queen, while behind the scenes, she fought for her independence. Elizabeth knew she would be judged for every move, but she wasn't afraid to defy societal expectations, proving that a woman could set her own terms in a man's world. Elizabeth Taylor won her first Academy Award for Butterfield 8, 1960. However, the honor was bittersweet. She'd acted in the film not out of choice, but under contractual obligation. "I hated that movie," she later admitted. Yet it was this performance that earned her recognition from the Academy. That Oscar became a symbol of her struggle to be seen by Hollywood as more than just a cover girl, as a true actress. Her second Oscar, for Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, 1966 solidified her greatness. In this role, Taylor portrayed a weary, suffering woman whose life was steeped in pain and destruction. In this film, Elizabeth revealed a new side of herself. Many believed her performance was autobiographical, as her personal life was in a deep turmoil at the time. Taylor channeled her inner anguish to create a masterpiece. Every scene felt like a burn, critics said of her performance. On screen, Elizabeth wasn't merely acting, she was living her pain, transforming it into art. The year 1958 brought a tragedy Elizabeth Taylor would never forget. Her third husband, producer Michael Todd, died in a plane crash, leaving her in profound grief and isolation. Michael was not just her husband, he was her anchor, a man who believed in her talent and supported her like no one else. At the time of the tragedy, Elizabeth was pregnant, but the stress caused her to lose the child. It was a double loss that seemed to strip her life of meaning. "I felt utterly empty," she later confessed. Yet even in this state, she had to appear in public, smile for the cameras, and continue being Elizabeth Taylor. This experience profoundly changed her outlook on life. She began to see it as fleeting, and every opportunity as something that must not be wasted. In 1959, Elizabeth Taylor found herself at the center of yet another public scandal. Her fourth husband, singer Eddie Fisher, left his wife's actress Debbie Reynolds to be with Elizabeth. The decision sparked outrage. Debbie's fans and the press lashed out at Taylor, accusing her of destroying the perfect family. For Elizabeth, however, this marriage was an attempt to cope with the pain of Michael Todd's death. She needed someone to lean on, someone to fill the void. But Eddie proved too weak to handle her strong personality and vibrant nature. Their relationship quickly cooled, leaving disappointment in place of solace. This marriage taught her a valuable lesson. Love born out of a need for comfort rarely proves genuine. It ended just as it had begun, amid the applause and the condemnation of the public. On the set of Cleopatra in 1963, a storm erupted that would forever change Elizabeth Taylor's life. A fiery passion ignited between her and Richard Burton, shattering both their marriages. Their affair was so intense and scandalous that it became a topic of global fascination. Their first marriage, 1964 to 1974, became a symbol of everything love could offer, from the greatest joy to utter destruction. Burton lavished Elizabeth with legendary jewels, including the famous Taylor-Burton diamond, and made promises he often broke. Their arguments were as epic as their reconciliations, and every detail of their tumultuous life was fodder for public consumption. After divorcing in 1974, they remarried in 1975, though this union lasted less than a year. Their love was like fire, bright, all-consuming, but destructive. Their relationship symbolized a passion capable of both creation and destruction, as well as a defiance of societal judgment. They loved each other against all odds, despite the media frenzy, gossip, and their own flaws. Elizabeth once said, "Richard was the love of my life, even if we couldn't stay together." Their relationship became the epitome of true passion, with all its highs and lows, proving that love can be both a curse and a blessing. In 1976, Elizabeth Taylor sought a drastic change in her life by marrying Senator John Warner. Her seventh marriage seemed like a chance for peace and stability. Exhausted by endless scandals and public scrutiny, she saw the world of politics as an opportunity to retreat from Hollywood. However, the reality turned out to be quite different. In a world focused on laws and state affairs, Elizabeth felt out of place. Her charisma, so treasured on screen, had no outlet in the political sphere. Feelings of alienation and loneliness gradually plunged her into depression. During this time, she began to abuse alcohol and distance herself even further from her once glamorous life. Her attempt to find a new purpose ended in years of isolation and self-destruction. Her last marriage, however, became the subject of public ridicule. Elizabeth Taylor's eighth and final marriage was perhaps the most surprising of her life. While in a rehabilitation center, she met Larry Fortensky, a simple construction worker far removed from the world of fame and film. The press mocked their union. How could the great Taylor choose an ordinary laborer? But for Elizabeth, this marriage symbolized her desire to start anew. She longed to shed her star persona and simply live as an ordinary person. Although their marriage ended in a divorce in 1996, it represented her final attempt to find happiness in sincere, unpretentious relationships. Elizabeth Taylor's love stories were always intertwined with scandals. Her affair with Eddie Fisher broke up his marriage to Debbie Reynolds. Her relationship with Richard Burton destroyed both of their families, and other romances sparked waves of public condemnation. She was a frequent target of criticism, embodying everything that puritanical morality deemed wrong. Yet Elizabeth never apologized for her choices. She loved as she knew how, always following her heart rather than societal conventions. Expensive jewels, including the legendary Taylor Burton diamond, lavish parties that became the stuff of legend, and her unpredictable personality made Elizabeth more than just an actress. She became the symbol of Hollywood's extravagant era. She lived as if each day were her last, sparing neither money nor emotions. But beneath the opulence was a woman searching for love, happiness, and her place in a world where every move she made was scrutinized by millions. Each breakup in Elizabeth Taylor's life left deep scars. She sought solace in alcohol and prescription drugs, which became her companions during times of despair. Tumultuous relationships, betrayals, and public judgment all took a toll on her inner strength. Her addiction wasn't merely a problem, it was a way of coping with the burden she bore as a star, wife, and mother. But every attempt to numb her pain led her into another cycle of self-destruction. Motherhood was always a significant but challenging part of Elizabeth's life. She had 4 children whom she loved deeply. However, her tumultuous personal life often pushed them to the sidelines. Long filming schedules, endless travels, scandals, and crises made it difficult for her to be the mother she aspired to be. Her children grew up in the shadow of her fame, often witnessing her dramas firsthand. Yet despite everything, Elizabeth worked hard to maintain a close bond with them. Despite 8 marriages and legions of admirers, Elizabeth Taylor often admitted to feeling lonely. She was surrounded by people, but few truly knew her. Being Elizabeth Taylor meant not only admiration, but also an inability to find genuine connections. Her life was full of dazzling moments, but behind the scenes, she was a woman who simply wanted to be loved and understood. Elizabeth endured countless highs and lows, yet her indomitable spirit remained intact, solidifying her status as a legend. In the 1970s, Elizabeth Taylor became a favorite target of the tabloid press. Her divorces, struggles with alcohol, and weight gain were dissected with such fervor that each new headline delivered a blow to her reputation. Newspapers branded her as a fallen star, mocking the appearance that was once considered the epitome of beauty. Imagine, a woman whose life was always illuminated by the spotlight suddenly finding herself as the center of public ridicule. She was used to adoration, but now she was judged and ridiculed, as though the world had forgotten everything she'd given it. By the late 1970s, Elizabeth Taylor realized her time in Hollywood was coming to an end. With age, health issues, and shifting audience preferences, the leading roles she once secured effortlessly were no longer coming her way. It wasn't just a career she was losing, it was a part of her identity, the star that had lit her path throughout her life. One of the most devastating losses for Elizabeth was the death of her close friend, Rock Hudson, from AIDS in 1985. He wasn't just a colleague, but someone with whom she shared some of the most intimate moments of her life. This tragedy deeply shook her. However, rather than succumbing to grief, she turned the loss into a mission, becoming one of the first celebrities to speak openly about HIV and AIDS. Elizabeth became a symbol of the fight against the epidemic, dedicating herself to advocacy and charity work. But as the saying goes, misfortunes never come alone. Elizabeth's extravagant lifestyle, which had become her signature, eventually led to financial struggles. Despite her enormous earnings, she often faced money shortages. The lavish jewelry and homes she once cherished became a heavy burden. For a woman accustomed to luxury, this was a painful confrontation with reality. She understood she could no longer afford to live as she had before, but giving up her opulence felt like losing a symbol of her status and strength. And what came next? In 1983, Elizabeth Taylor made the courageous decision to publicly acknowledge her struggles and check herself into a rehabilitation center to battle her addiction to alcohol and medication. This was a bold step for a star of her stature. During an era when celebrities preferred to hide their vulnerabilities, Elizabeth was unafraid to confront hers openly. Her decision caused a sensation. The world was used to seeing her as a dazzling and untouchable at the pinnacle of her fame, but Elizabeth revealed a different side, her vulnerability, which made her all the more human. For her, it wasn't just about treatment, it was about the first step towards reclaiming control over her life. After completing her treatment, Elizabeth attempted a return to the screen. While she no longer received leading roles, she appeared in several television films and advertising campaigns. Though her cinematic brilliance had dimmed, her perseverance and determination to continue working inspired her fans. She no longer sought to reclaim her position as a top tier, but embraced a new chapter in her life. Her resilience and fight to rebuild herself became a powerful example for others. In her final years, Elizabeth Taylor faced struggles far more daunting than her battles for roles or love. She suffered from numerous chronic illnesses, including heart failure, osteoporosis, and scoliosis. Each new ailment served as a stark reminder of the fragility of the body that was once a symbol of beauty. Elizabeth underwent more than 30 surgeries, including hip replacements, complex heart surgeries, and treatments for skin cancer. Once admired by millions, she found herself confined to a wheelchair, enduring daily pain. As she aged, Elizabeth appeared in public less and less. She spent most of her time at her home in Los Angeles, surrounded by only her closest confidants. The rare interviews she granted revealed that her focus had shifted away from fame and roles, centering instead on finding inner peace. For a woman who had spent much of her life under the glare of spotlights, isolation became her new reality. Yet she did not complain. Her home became her fortress, and the memories of her once glorious life brought her solace. February 2011 marked the beginning of the final chapter in Elizabeth Taylor's life. Due to complications from heart failure, she was hospitalized. She spent several weeks under close medical supervision, fully aware that this was the last act of the great drama that was her life. Her children and grandchildren, her most precious legacy, were by her side, offering comfort during the most difficult moments. Elizabeth remained strong, facing the inevitable with grace. She knew her time was coming to an end, but did not fear it. She had lived a full life and left an indelible mark on the world. On March 23, 2011, at the age of 79, Elizabeth Taylor passed away. Her death shocked the world, serving as the final chapter in the legendary story of a woman who was much more than just a Hollywood star. Her funeral was a private affair, conducted according to the Jewish tradition she'd embraced in her later years. Even in this solemn moment, Elizabeth's charisma and sense of humor shone through. She had insisted that the ceremony begin 15 minutes late, saying, "Let my final role be worthy of me." Even in death, she remained a woman who could surprise, maintain her dignity, and stay true to herself. Elizabeth Taylor left this world, but her legacy, from her iconic roles to her tireless advocacy, continues to inspire millions.